Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Stories Speak English, the podcast that helps you sound more natural and confident when you speak English. I'm Tinas, and today we're diving into one of English's strangest and most puzzling features silent letters. Why do we write knie but say knee? Why does listen have a T that nobody pronounces? And what's the deal with climb? Why add a B if we're never going to say it? These odd spellings often confuse learners and native speakers too. But there's actually a fascinating story behind them. Silent letters are like time travelers from the past, showing us how English used to sound. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's uncover the mystery behind these invisible letters. Let's start with the basics. A silent letter is a letter that appears in the spelling of a word but isn't pronounced. In English, they show up everywhere. Think of right, doubt, gnome, psychology. You see the letters, but you don't say them. So why are they still there? Well, English spelling is a bit like an old map. It shows you the roads people used to walk, even if we don't use them anymore. Many of our silent letters are leftovers from older English versions, like Old English, Middle English, or even words borrowed from French, Latin, and Greek. Let's look at some of the most famous examples and the stories they tell. Let's start with the silent K, which shows up in words like knife, knee, knock, no. You don't say the K, but it's there, front and center. Why? Because in Old English, the K was not silent. People really did say knife, knee, knock. The word night, for example, was pronounced knit, with a hard K and a rough GH sound at the end. But as English evolved, people stopped pronouncing the K before the N at the beginning of the words. It was just too awkward to say K and N together. Our mouths naturally wanted to simplify things, so the sound disappeared, but the spelling didn't. By the time spelling rules started to become standardized in the 15th and 16th century, thanks to the printing press, the K was already in silent speech. But publishers kept it in writing. Why? Because spelling was based more on etymology, word history, than pronunciation. So today, the K is a fossil. It reminds us of how people used to talk centuries ago. Next up, the silent T. You've probably seen it in words like listen, castle, fasten, whistle, moisten. In all these words, the T is completely silent. So, what happened? Most of these words come from Middle English, a version of English spoken roughly 600 to 800 years ago. At that time, the T was pronounced. For example, castle was more like castle, and listen was listen. But over time, people began speaking faster and more smoothly, and some consonants got dropped in casual speech. Saying castle became castle, and eventually just castle. Once again, the sound disappeared, but spelling stayed the same. You'll often see the T in patterns like STLE and STEN. So, if you spot one of those, chances are the T is a silent ghost. Fun fact: even Shakespeare's audiences were probably dropping the T in these words, but English spelling has always been slow to change. Why? Because it takes time to update dictionaries, teach new spellings, and, let's face it, people hate changing rules. Now, for one of the most puzzling silent letters, the B at the end of words like climb, thumb, lamb, numb, bomb. The rule here, when a word ends in MB, the B is usually silent. So, why is it even there? Again, blame Old English and Germanic roots. The words used to have the final B sound. For instance, climb may have been pronounced as climber in some dialects. But just like the silent T, this final B became unnecessary and awkward to pronounce. Over time, people dropped it. Still, When English spelling started to freeze into standard forms during the printing era, writers and printers often kept the old spellings to show the world's origins and connect it to Latin or German. So the B became a sort of historical decoration, a signal where the word came from, even if we no longer say it. If you want a quick trick, when a word ends at MB, you usually don't pronounce the B. At this point, you might be thinking, if we don't pronounce these letters anymore, why not just update the spelling? Great question, and many people have tried. In the 1800s, a group called the Spelling Reform Movement wanted to simplify English spelling completely. They had the support from famous people like Mark Twain and Theodore Roosevelt. Some wanted to spell night as N-I-T-E or through as T-H-R-U. But the problem, English is spoken in many countries, and changing spelling everywhere would have been incredibly difficult. Plus, old spellings connect us to the history of words and literature. If we change them, we'd lose those connections. That's why silent letters remain part of English. They can be tricky, but they're also fascinating clues to where the language came from. Let's wrap up what we've learned today. Silent K and knee, knife, and no come from Old English, where the K was pronounced. Silent T and listen, castle, and whistle dropped out in Middle English to make speech smoother. Silent B and climb, thumb, lamb was once spoken, but disappeared over time, though spelling didn't change. Silent letters may be strange, but they're like little time capsules, reminding us of English's rich history. Let's test your listening. I'll say a word. Can you guess which letter is silent? Thumb. A silent letter B. Castle. A silent letter T. No. A silent letter K. English isn't always logical, but it's always full of stories. Silent letters may not speak, but they do tell us something. They whisper the history of how people used to talk, how languages changed, and how words traveled across time. Thanks for spending time with me today on Story Speak English. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following us, sharing it with a friend, or leaving a comment. Every little bit helps us grow this community of learners. I'm Tinas, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep listening, keep learning, and keep loving English. Bye for now.